I didn't think much about the so-called 27 Club until July 23, 2011. I was in a coffee shop in Austin, Texas, nursing a hangover, when a news alert popped up on my phone. Amy Winehouse dead at 27. I blinked at the screen, remembering her raw, aching voice and the tabloid headlines about rehab. The news anchor on the wall-mounted television listed names. Jimi Hendrix, D. Sept. 18, 1970. Janis Joplin, D. Oct. 4, 1970. Jim Morrison, July 3, 1971. Kurt Cobain, April 5, 1994. All gone at 27. It felt like a trivia fact you trot out at parties until that moment, when it suddenly felt like an omen. I turned 27 a month later. On the morning of my birthday, I found a padded envelope on my front porch with no return address. Inside was an old cassette tape and a note written in jagged block letters. Listen alone. No signature, no explanation. I didn't own a cassette player anymore, but my neighbor, an older guy named Carl, had a garage full of vintage electronics. When I asked, he shrugged and said, "Sure, I've got an old Sony Walkman." We plugged in the player, and I put the headphones over my ears. White noise hissed, then a voice crackled through, deep, weary, speaking as if from far away. "November 15th, 1993, the voice said. "Hotel room 6B, Chelsea Hotel, New York City. My name is..." And static swallowed the next words. My skin prickled. "If you're hearing this, you're curious about the curse. Don't be. Curiosity is how it finds you. The number isn't a coincidence. It's a door. And once you notice the door, it notices you." I yanked off the headphones. Carl raised an eyebrow. "What?" I told him the gist. He chuckled and chalked it up to some artist's concept, but my curiosity was hooked. That afternoon, I Googled November 15th, 1993, Chelsea Hotel. That date was exactly 17 years after an obscure Seattle musician named Jason Hodge died at 27 of an overdose in that same hotel. The internet was full of conspiracy theories about the 27 Club, the idea that a Faustian bargain or a numerological curse claims artists at that age. Most articles dismissed it as pattern-seeking, but I felt a low hum of dread. Maybe it was because I lived with a guitar in my hand and a half-finished EP on my hard drive, or because I'd been hearing whispers when I played alone at night, notes bending in ways my fingers didn't. Over the next weeks, the number 27 followed me like a stray. My grocery receipt totaled $27.27. I woke up at 2:27 a.m., 3 nights in a row. A streetcar in Dallas I'd never noticed before carried the route number 27. A friend who didn't know about my obsession texted me a photo of a hand-stitched patch he'd found at a flea market. Club 27 in faded red thread. He thought it was funny. I didn't. I decided to push back. I booked a flight to Paris that October. Jim Morrison is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery. I'd always wanted to pay my respects. Standing at his grave on a rainy Tuesday felt surreal. The marble was covered in lipstick prints and half-burned candles. Behind me, a tour guide whispered, "Il est mort à 27 ans." He died at 27. I laid a guitar pick at the base of the headstone and felt a chill run down my spine despite the muggy air. That night, in my hotel room near the Bastille, I found another note slipped under my door. "It knows you now." The rational part of me said someone was messing with me. The storyteller in me saw narrative threads connecting like a constellation. Either way, I couldn't let it go. Back in the States, I drove north to Renton, Washington, to visit Jimi Hendrix's memorial. It was a gray November morning at 45 degrees and drizzling. I sat on the cold stone bench under the domed granite structure, my fingers tracing the engraved lyrics of Little Wing. For a moment, everything went silent. No cars, no birds, no distant freeway hum. Then, faintly, I heard a single guitar note ring out, sustained and clean, the exact tone of a Stratocaster. It hung in the air, then faded. No one else was around. I checked my phone. 10:27 a.m. By the time 2012 rolled around, my friends joked that I was the healthiest 27-year-old they knew because I'd stopped drinking, started meditating, and stayed away from the kinds of excess that felled my musical heroes. I told them I was doing it for my lungs and liver. The truth was, I was trying to dodge a curse. On the night before my 28th birthday, I sat alone in my studio apartment in Austin, the cassette tape on the table. I pressed play again, this time letting the voice finish. "The door opens differently for everyone," the voice rasped. "For some, it's a phone call. For me, it was a song in my head. I couldn't stop humming. Whatever form it takes, it will feel like a gift until it isn't." I tried to warn the others. If you get this tape, leave the songs unwritten. Let the door close. Choose obscurity over applause. Choose life. Static swallowed the rest. I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark TV screen. I blew out the candle on my cupcake at midnight and felt a weight lift off my chest. 28 came and went. The number 27 stopped appearing everywhere. Sometimes I wonder if I narrowly missed becoming part of a statistic. If that cassette tape was a prank or a lifeline. My music never went viral. I never made the cover of Rolling Stone, but I play small gigs, breathe clean air, and visit cemeteries when I travel. Now, when I see a headline about a young artist burning out, I whisper a thank you to a voice on a tape that told me to step away from the door. As for who sent the cassette, I never found out. A few months ago, on a whim, I stopped by a thrift shop on Congress Avenue in a bin of old records. Something glinted. It was a bronze lapel pin shaped like the number 27. I flipped it over. Scratched into the back were 3 words. "It's not over." My birthday is coming up again, and I've started waking up at 2:27 a.m. Maybe numbers don't let you go so easily. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. The first time I heard about Elisa Lam, I was sitting on a red-eye flight from New York to Los Angeles in February 2013. The woman in the seat next to me flipped open her laptop, and I caught a glimpse of grainy security camera footage. A young woman in a red hoodie stepped into an elevator, pressed several buttons, and then behaved as if someone were just outside the doors. She peered down the hallway, flattened herself against the wall, gestured with her hands as if speaking to someone unseen, then disappeared from view. The clip ran on loop. My seatmate sighed. "She vanished from the Cecil Hotel last week. They can't find her." I nodded politely, filed it away as yet another tragic story in a city that feeds on tragedy, and closed my eyes. 2 weeks later, I checked into that same hotel. I know how that sounds. Morbid curiosity. Maybe. To be fair, I had booked the room months before for a job that required me to be downtown. The Cecil Hotel on Main Street, built in 1924, offered cheap weekly rates. It had a faded elegance that appealed to my love of Los Angeles noir. I liked its black and white floor tiles and brass elevators. I liked that Bukowski had supposedly lived there. I didn't like that by the time I arrived on February 20th. Elisa Lam's name was synonymous with it. Her body had been found the day before, On February 19th, maintenance workers investigated complaints of low water pressure and strange-tasting tap water. They climbed a ladder to one of the 4 cylindrical tanks on the roof. When they opened the hatch, they discovered Elisa floating inside, naked, her clothes and cell phone at the bottom. According to the coroner, she had drowned accidentally, and bipolar disorder may have contributed. The LAPD later said there was no evidence of foul play. People didn't believe it. The hotel reopened anyway, chalking it up as one more in a string of dark events in its long history. I checked in, signed a waiver acknowledging that the Cecil was not responsible for theft or bodily harm, and rode the elevator up to the 10th floor. The bellman, a man with tired eyes and a name tag that read Tomas, didn't mention Elisa. Neither did I, but the air felt heavy. The hallway carpet muffled my footsteps. When I turned the key in my door, there was a slight resistance, as if the room itself were reluctant to let me in. My first shower left me unsettled. The water ran brown for the first few seconds, then cleared. I told myself it was residue from a century-old plumbing system. Still, I couldn't shake the image of those water tanks. I lay awake that night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering how she got up there. The roof had been locked, with alarms. The tanks were heavy metal cylinders with tight-fitting lids. Police said she had climbed a fire escape, triggered no alarm, and opened a 20-pound lid alone. I tried to imagine it. The cold metal under her hands, the LA skyline glittering to the west, the sound of Skid Row down below, her heart racing. At 3:17 a.m., something woke me, a rhythmic tapping. I sat up. It wasn't my door. It was the elevator. The elevator that had been the last place anyone saw her alive. I got up and opened my door. The hallway was empty. The elevator doors stood across from me, closed. I pressed the call button, and they slid open with a groan. No one inside. I stepped in and pressed L for lobby. The doors stayed open. I pressed door close. Nothing. I jabbed all the floor buttons, just like Elisa had in the video. The doors hesitated, then closed. The car descended, stopped on the 5th floor, and lingered. Doors half open. The lights flickered. I could have sworn I saw a shadow move past the crack, as if someone were standing just outside. A chill climbed my spine. "Hello?" I whispered, feeling ridiculous. No response. Finally, the doors closed, and I descended to the lobby. Tomas sat at the front desk, reading a paperback. I walked over and said, "The elevator's acting weird." He looked up, tired. "It does that when people press all the buttons. It's old." I nodded, all about to turn away, when he added quietly, "We get a lot of visitors now because of that girl. Some of them go up to the roof. Management put new locks on everything." He held my gaze. "Don't try it. Respect the dead." The next morning, I brushed my teeth and again tasted a metallic tang in the water. I spat it out, filled a glass from the sink, and looked at it in the light. It was clear. Imagined? Maybe. Before checking out, I took the stairs down instead of the elevator. On the 6th floor landing, a door marked "Roof Access, Alarm Will Sound" stood chained and padlocked. I touched the cold metal. Behind it, a set of iron stairs led up, lit by a dusty skylight. For a moment, I thought I heard water sloshing. I turned and hurried down the rest of the stairs, feeling foolish and watched. After leaving Los Angeles, I couldn't stop thinking about Elisa Lam's elevator ride. The LAPD released the footage hoping someone would recognize her or the person she seemed to be talking to. No one came forward. Internet sleuths dissected every frame, arguing about whether she was hiding from someone or playing an elevator game from South Korea. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Ghosts of the Cecil, a serial killer, government experiments. None of them answered the simple question of how a 21-year-old college student from Vancouver ended up in a water tank alone. The official explanation remains accidental drowning. Sometimes the mundane is the most horrifying. I don't have a grand revelation. All I have is a string of moments. The brown water, the stuck elevator, the sound of sloshing, and a lingering unease. I still dream of pressing elevator buttons that won't close the doors. In the dream, when the doors finally slide shut, I turn around and someone is standing behind me, soaking wet, hair draped over her face. I wake up sweating, heart racing, the taste of metal in my mouth. Maybe our minds create patterns to make sense of senseless tragedies. Maybe some places absorb grief and radiate it back at anyone who gets too close. Maybe the mystery of Elisa Lam is that there is no mystery, just a young woman who slipped through the cracks of a city and a hotel known for swallowing people whole. Still, sometimes, late at night, I pull up that grainy video and watch her step in and out of the elevator, pressing buttons and gesturing to someone I can't see. And I wonder if curiosity is a door we should resist opening. There's more to say about the Cecil Hotel and its history of darkness, but that's another story for another night. People always ask why I'm fascinated by haunted places. I usually joke that growing up in Ohio will make you look for excitement anywhere. But the truth is, I've always been drawn to places where history and tragedy overlap. So when my friend Anna dared me to spend a night at the Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa, I didn't hesitate. I figured at worst I'd be bored in a creaky old house. At best, I'd have a story to tell. On June 10th, 1912, 6 members of the Moore family and 2 visiting children were bludgeoned to death with an axe inside their white frame house on 2nd Street. The town awoke to horror. The killer was never caught. Over a century later, the murders remain one of Iowa's most notorious unsolved crimes. In the 1990s, the house was restored to its 1912 condition and opened for daytime tours and overnight stays. Ghost hunters flock there. Skeptics roll their eyes. I fell somewhere in between when I pulled into town in October 2018, past the water tower, painted with a smiling face and the words, "Villisca, we've got a great axe to grind." The caretaker, a middle-aged man in a Carhartt jacket named Darwin, met me at the gate as the sun set. "You're the only one tonight?" he asked. I nodded. Anna had bailed. Darwin handed me a lantern and an EMF meter, like he was handing over a hotel room key and a mint. "No electricity in the house," he explained. "We try to keep it authentic. There's a porta-potty out back. No smoking, no Ouija boards. If you feel uncomfortable, don't run upstairs. The stairs are steep. Just come outside. I live down the block." He paused, as if considering whether to say more. "Some people hear kids laughing, some get scratched. If you talk to them, be polite. They were somebody's babies." The front door creaked open like a sound effect from a horror movie. The living room was small, with floral wallpaper and a braided rug. A framed photo of the Moore family sat on a table. Josiah and Sarah and their 4 children, all smiling stiffly at the camera, unaware of what awaited them in the early hours of June 10th. The house smelled of aged wood and something sweet, like old apple cores. I set my sleeping bag on the floor where the sofa had been in 1912, turned on the lantern and sat cross-legged, listening. Outside, the wind rustled the cornfields. Inside, it was so quiet I could hear the tick of my watch. I spent the first hour wandering from room to room, whispering observations into my phone's recorder like an amateur investigator. In the kitchen, An antique cast-iron stove gleamed dully in the lantern light. In the children's bedroom upstairs, 2 small beds sat under slanted ceilings. A toy ball lay in a corner. Its paint faded. I resisted the urge to move it. I sat on one of the beds and imagined the Stillinger sisters, Ina and Lena, aged 8 and 12, whispering secrets to each other before falling asleep for the last time. The house felt heavy, as if sorrow had settled into the plaster. Around 1 a.m., I lay in my sleeping bag on the living room floor. The lantern turned low. That's when the footsteps started. They were faint but distinct, soft padding across the upstairs floorboards. My rational brain tried to identify animal sources. A raccoon, maybe. Yet the sound was rhythmic, evenly spaced, as if a child were walking slowly from one room to another. The EMF meter resting by my hand flickered from green to yellow. I whispered, "Hello?" The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was almost louder than the steps themselves. Then a giggle, high-pitched, quick. It came from directly above me. A chill darted down my spine. "Who's there?" I said, forcing my voice to be steady. No answer. The EMF meter flashed red, then settled. In the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The toy ball from the upstairs bedroom rolled across the kitchen threshold and stopped at the base of the stairs. I stared, my pulse hammering. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked, and immediately felt ridiculous for talking to an empty room. Something brushed past my shoulder, a cool sensation, like walking through a spider web. I flinched, my left arm tingled. In the dim light, 3 shallow scratches appeared on my forearm. They weren't deep, but they stung. My fight-or-flight instinct screamed, "Get out!" Instead, curiosity pinned me to the floor. I whispered, "I'm sorry for what happened to you." The air seemed to lighten slightly. The EMF meter calmed. The ball stayed where it was. I did not sleep. At 5 a.m., dawn's first gray light filtered through the lace curtains. The house looked ordinary again, dust motes floating, wallpaper peeling. I packed up my sleeping bag, heart still racing, and stepped onto the dewy grass. Darwin was already outside, coffee in hand. "Rough night?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at the scratches. I nodded. "Do you ever get used to it?" I asked. He took a sip. "You don't get used to kids who never got to grow up." He looked at the house with something like affection and sadness. "They like to play, especially when folks are respectful. Back home in Columbus, I listened to the audio I'd recorded. At the exact moment I said, 'Do you want me to leave?' Another voice whispered softly on the tape, 'Stay.' I replayed it until the whisper lodged itself in my bones. Logic tells me old houses make noise and people see what they want to see. Emotion tells me that for one night in Iowa, I shared space with echoes of a tragedy that refuses to fade. I haven't been back. Sometimes, when I see a faded farmhouse on a country road, I think of that ball rolling toward the stairs and the voice that asked me to stay. Maybe someday I'll return with new questions. Maybe some doors are best left closed, but the pull of the past is strong, and the Villisca house still stands, waiting.